Today on the show, we need to sleep more, we're getting stupider, and while Chris Hardwick is bad, Chris Brown still is much, much worse.
Can't you see? Everyone! They're here already! You're next!
Let's go!
Welcome to the future, where the glass is half full and you'll need new glasses, where you'll be jumping from conclusions.
The past is annulled, and a new future is born.
Never before in history has so much meant so little to so many. AD on the radio.
So did you have a good weekend? I had a good weekend. It was a good weekend. The Mets won. The Mets won 2 in a row. Something that the Mets have not done in quite some time now. Took 2. Count them 1-2 from the Arizona Diamondbacks. Mets started off this season unbelievably hot. 11-game winning streaks, things of that nature. Best record in baseball. We couldn't believe it. We thought the sky was falling. And then, as it often does for our beloved New York Metropolitans, things went south, and things went south quickly, and we were left with our heads in our hands going, alack-a-day forsooth, what are we to do? For yea, verily, we suck again. But we had to look out the window and make sure the sky wasn't falling again this weekend when, like I said, we actually won 2 in a row. It was a good feeling. I love my Mets. I love my Mets when they win. I love them when they lose. I love the Mets. It's just no way around it. What are you going to do? Become a Yankees fan? If it was that easy, I would. I've just never been able to develop an emotional connection with anything other than the Mets. After living in Houston for 10 years, I developed a real fondness. I love the Houston Astros. I developed a fondness for the Houston Astros, but the Mets always will have my heart, and that's never been an easy thing, as any other Mets fan will tell you. But them winning 2 in a row was kind of a big deal. It made me excited to talk to my dad. Talk to my dad for Father's Day, and very exciting because, well, the Mets are playing in Los Angeles against the Dodgers in September. Now, my kid sister is about to have a baby. Yep. And right around the time that my dad is going to come from Kosovo, where he lives, to meet this kid, is right around the time where the Mets are playing the Dodgers. So it made me excited. Hey, Dad, they just won 2. We could maybe meet your grandchild and taking a Mets game together. Now, my father is a Yankees fan, but still, the idea of going to a ball game with my dad is like the greatest thing ever. So it made me really excited. I was, of course, talking to my father. I was, of course, talking to him because it was Father's Day on Sunday. A day where people all over the world spend time with or call their dads. I saw it when I went out to grab some lunch on Father's Day. Saw hordes of people, big family dinners, big family lunches. Dad's still picking up the check, even though it's his day. Guys wandering around in greatest dad t-shirts that did not fit, but were freaking adorable. Dads looking around stores at the mall, wondering if they can return something that's engraved because they didn't use that piece of crap last year and they're not going to this year. That's a father's lot in life. You're going to get lousy gifts. It's just what happens. My father used to have this kind of aftershave that just sat on his dresser drawer for a really long time. And I think I got him another one of those. I was like, that's what my dad likes. I'll go out and get him some. And he's like, didn't have the heart to tell me. But the reason that thing had been sitting on his dresser for so long was because, well, somebody gave it to him and he was never going to use it. So it just sort of sat there. I think he called it old estate agent. I guess there was this idea back in the day amongst professionals that if you couldn't succeed as a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or accountant or something like that, you went into real estate sales. So estate agent types were not necessarily the best respected folks in the business community at the time when my dad was going and doing all of his learning to figure out where he was going to go in the world and what he was going to do. But yeah, this stuff is called old estate agent. That's what he called it. But it just sat up there on his dresser, never getting used. And because I saw it there, it was an omnipresent thing, and I wasn't checking the levels or anything, and I was a kid, I think I bought him that same stuff. And he didn't have the heart until years later to tell me, oh, no, that stuff was horrible. I was like, but I bought you a bottle. He's like, yeah, it's sitting right there next to the other bottle. But you said you liked it. Well, that's what fathers do. That's what fathers do on Father's Day. But it's an important day. Mother's Day, Father's Day, any day that makes you kind of take stock of who you are, where you came from, and your parents' genetic contribution is a good one. All those things that your father taught you, all those things that you taught yourself after your father told you the wrong stuff, or whatever the hell the case may be, it's all beautiful, and it all made you, you. And you saw all over the place people wishing their dads a happy birthday, happy Father's Day. You saw people wishing their fathers a happy Father's Day. You saw them thanking them for bringing them up the right way. But there was one Father's Day greeting that a buddy of mine sort of shouted out his father with that made me really think, that's really on the money. All of us should be more like this.
Real radio.
104.1.
Where the left and right come together for fundamental truths. AD on the radio, on Twitter at ADSXE.
So it was Father's Day yesterday. I had a great time talking to my dad. Told him I loved him. He told me he loved me. Looking forward to seeing him. My father's lived in Kosovo for the last, 15 years or so now. And he was sort of like a corporate lawyer back in the day. You and I have talked about this a little bit, but he was a corporate lawyer back in the day. And he also happened to be a little bit of a hippie. Now, being a corporate oil lawyer like he was and a hippie, these are two sort of like moralistically diametrically opposed things, I would imagine. So after he got done doing all that stuff, he went off and did lots of sort of human rights work. And that took him to Kosovo for a little bit. And he liked it and he found real meaning in his work there. So he stayed there, which is great for him. But my sister and I don't get to see him as often as we would like to. So, it was great to talk to him. Great to talk to my dad on Father's Day and tell him that I loved him and hear that he loved me. And I'm really looking forward to him coming to visit. He's coming to visit. My kid sister is having a baby. Yeah. It's insane. We've finally sort of grown up a little bit, I think. But my kid sister's having a baby. And he's going to come and meet the kid. And we're all going to hang out. And I'm really looking forward to it. But it made me think about the nature of being a dad. Made me think about what my sister's husband is going through as his child is about to come into the world. Made me think about all the different people I know that have talked about their relationships with their parents, their fathers in particular. Some good, some bad. Some people lucked out. Some people had tumultuous and tenuous relationships with their fathers. Some had fathers that were just no good at all. And some got really, really lucky. And you see all these greetings all over Facebook and whatnot. People wishing their father a happy Father's Day, saying thank you for everything. Thank you for everything that you taught me. Thank you for one thing or another. But there's this one guy I know who wished his father a happy Father's Day. Now, this is a guy who's sort of chosen to take the path less traveled. He's he put his parents through something similar to what I put my parents through. He became a musician. I did that. Now, my mom was a musician, so there was a point of reference there. My mom understood what it entailed. Didn't want me to do it, but understood what it entailed. It wasn't something completely foreign and alien. My buddy, well, his parents didn't get that at all. They didn't understand it. Still probably don't. He's still doing it with greater and greater success every year. And I know his parents are proud. And that's great. But they didn't get it. They didn't understand it. They didn't comprehend how this guy was going to make a living, support himself, make his way in the world. And I think that's the real crux of the matter, isn't it, for parents? I've got these kids for 18 years. And in that time, I have to make sure that they can equip themselves so that they can go out in the world and survive. And I'm going to be there for some of the time where they're going out into the world, but I can't be here forever. So I have to know that I did a good enough job educating them, teaching them how to get through life, giving them the tools that they need to not just get eaten alive by life. And that's got to be a mind-numbingly difficult thing. I remember talking to my dad about it. Like, how'd you deal with it? How'd you deal with, like, the first time I rode my bike by myself somewhere, crossing streets, things like that? He's like, you just have to trust. You just have to really, really hope that you've done everything right. Because at some point, you got to leave. You got to do things like drive by yourself, ride your bike by yourself, go to school by yourself, take a train by yourself, take a plane by yourself. I'll never forget when I was like, I think in the 8th grade, I went back from my native England to visit some family members in America by myself. It was one of my first flights alone, and it did not go well. It was not a healthy thing. My plane got into New York City really, really late, and I spent the night on the floor of JFK Airport. My parents going out of their minds. But when I checked in with them, they were like, okay, good to know. Glad to hear it. Glad you're still alive. And I can't imagine anything would prepare you for the idea that your 12-year-old son or 13-year-old son was going to spend the night on the floor of JFK Airport amongst a whole bunch of strange, sleepy businessmen waiting for their connecting flights first thing the next morning. I can't imagine that there's anything that ever makes you feel okay with that, but that was how it went down. But there's one guy that I know. He chose, like I said, the path less traveled. He chose to be a musician, something his parents couldn't relate to, even a little bit. And he said he wanted to wish his dad a happy Father's Day. And this was some telling stuff, and a lesson to every last one of us. He said, "Happy Father's Day to my dad. We never agree. Hardly have we ever agreed on anything. But that's never stopped him from supporting me 1,000%. And that's what makes you a real dad." And you know, it's a great reminder to all of us, to you, to me, to every one of us. You don't have to agree with someone. Your father, your son, your sister, your brother, your husband, your coworker. You don't have to agree with someone to be supportive of them as a fellow human being and as a fellow American. Great reminder to all of us. And a belated happy Father's Day to you if you happen to be a dad.
For more stimulation and less irritation, 9 out of 10 doctors choose KPRC AM 950, Houston's more stimulating talk radio.
Don't get the blues, get all the news. We mean all of you guys out there in Radio Land.
All aboard!
He's back. AD on the radio.
Give it up, yeah. Give it up, yeah. Bring this on, come on.
So did you see this new stat about sleep? How much sleep do you tend to get every single night? How do you think that sets you up for the rest of the day? Sleep has been something I've had a really weird relationship with my entire life. I had a really hard time sleeping. I had horrible insomnia for my entire life, since about the 8th grade. And I'd done everything. Tried sleeping pills, sleep hygiene specialist, sleep clinic. None of it worked. What really actually worked was getting a new bed. It made a big, big difference. I went to this place that sort of specialized in trying to help you figure out what sort of bed is going to help you sleep a little bit better. Now, bear in mind, the vast majority of the beds that I'd slept in up till this point were, hotel room beds when I was on tour, my tour bus bunk. Although I will tell you this, though, man, there's something about a moving vehicle. That was the only time I ever really did sleep. I would sleep when we were touring in a van. I would just curl up on that front bench and I'd be knocked out. And then man, it was even more so when we got into a tour bus. It was like a cocoon, and I could sleep forever and ever and ever, as long as the bus was in motion. If we stopped, I would wake up immediately with a jolt and not be able to fall asleep until the bus started moving again. But being on a moving vehicle was the only thing that really knocked me out. Now, here's the thing. When you're on tour, you're sleeping in moving vehicles all the time. In daily life, not so much. So I've had problems sleeping like the entirety of my life. And bear in mind, most of the beds that I was in were kind of lousy. I mean, the bed that I grew up in, I've got no idea how good or bad that was. I just knew I've had problems sleeping since I was, like I said, about 8 years old. Didn't get a full night of sleep for a long time. Got through high school on a mixture of Pepsi and No-Dos and not very much sleep. And then after I got out of the band, I was, sleeping on futons and things that came from ding and dent sales, and, like, oh, it's so cheap because it fell off the back of a truck, the way you do when you're a kid kind of first starting out. You don't necessarily think I should spend the big bucks on the bed because that's where that's where I'm going to be set up for the rest of my day. So I actually got like a really nice bed, and I got it sort of like at a place that is sort of like an optometrist. The bed wasn't really expensive, but what they did do that was really cool, that was sort of like part of the service, I suppose, would go, bed number 1, bed number 2, bed number 3, bed number 4, bed number 3, like very similar to going to an optician. And it made me sleep like a baby when I got it. That lasted almost no time whatsoever, because as soon as I finally got myself a bed that could deal with the sleep problems I'd had my entire life, the workload got to the point where I couldn't sleep. But there's something very interesting that came out about sleep that I'm going to share with you in just a little bit. But how much sleep do you tend to get every single night? And how does that affect the way you feel? Does it make a freaking difference? Or do you just find like you get through it somehow or another? We'll get into all this. First, though, I wanted to play you. That's so cool. A high school receptionist sang "At Last" by Etta James over the PA system on the last day of school. Like, we're finished. We're done with you. You kids can go off on your summer vacation. I don't have to deal with you for another 3 months. A high school receptionist sang "At Last" by Etta James over the PA system on the last day of school. And it's actually stunningly good. Have a listen to this. She's singing into a phone receiver sitting her desk in front of a computer. Pretty amazing, right? Absolutely. What would you do, by the way? What would you do to have that feeling again? What would you do to have that feeling of being a kid and having that last day of school and getting into your summer vacation? Oh, it was the greatest feeling ever, that everlasting summer. No responsibilities, nothing to do. It was going to be the bestie best. You're going to have utter, total, and complete freedom. And like I said, that feeling, that last day of school feeling, amazing. I don't know if we could ever have it again, but what would you give for it? I would give an awful lot. I think a similar way to come across that feeling is to get a night of really good sleep. How often does that happen to you now? Like that one really good night of sleep where you haven't tossed, you haven't turned, you've slept peacefully all night long. And you wake up feeling refreshed, relaxed, not groggy, great, ready to take on the world. That happens increasingly rarely, I think, as we make our way in the world. We used to sleep like a baby when we were, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 years old. I mean, I struggled with insomnia since I was about 8. So I didn't really have that. But I hear that's what it's like for other people. Now, here's the thing. Have you heard about what we're doing to ourselves in this country? Have you heard about what modern life does to you and I? Like, how much sleep do you think you're supposed to get every single night? I'm not sure I know anybody who manages to get that fabled 8 hours of sleep a night that we're supposed to get. But even people who do, turns out you're failing just like the rest of us. Yeah, this is insane. According to sleep researchers out of Penn State University, modern life has gotten to be so stressful that now we really need 8.5 hours of sleep to be healthy. 8.5. How much sleep do you tend to get every single night? I got to be honest. I'm lucky. I am lucky if I get to bed at 4. And I wake up not at the crack of dawn. I'm not one of those super early risers, but I wake up about 8:30 every single day. So I'm lucky if I get to bed at 4. Usually I get to bed closer to 5 o'clock and I wake up at 8:30. So I'm stoked if I get 4 to 4.5 hours a night. I try and make up for it a little bit on the weekend. Sometimes I succeed, sometimes I fail, but I work a lot. And as a consequence, I don't sleep very much. And here's the thing. I'm not holding this up like I'm some don't need sleep badass. This is not some sort of sleep deprivation badge of honor. I think my situation is a little bit more common than it should be. I think a lot of us aren't getting much sleep. And there's been all sorts of studies about how effective this makes you. There's been all sorts of studies about how not getting enough real quality sleep can really have it really creates serious issues with health, can create serious issues with your mental state, your performance, and all of the above. I got to be honest with you. I had to work over the weekend. I had to work on Saturday. And during the week, I had to get up really, really, sort of regularly. Oh man, there was one day this week where I had to be up at 6:30. Now that's not that bad. I mean, lots of people get up way earlier than that, but I went to bed at 4:30. So I got like 2 hours of sleep and then had to drive off somewhere to stand outside of a Home Depot for this client that we were doing. This is part of the non-mystical part of radio. This will blow the mystique when you see me groggy at 8 a.m, hanging around going, spin the prize wheel, you could win stuff. And it's fun and it's cool. It's something I enjoy, but it happened early in the morning and not a lot of sleep was involved. So it was kind of a surreal experience. And I had to, like I said, I went to bed at about 4:30. I woke up at 6:30. 2 hours of sleep I've discovered is not enough. And this was on the back of that trip I had to make to Santa Fe, New Mexico this past weekend, just gone by, which was great. It was a lot of fun. It was really, really cool. But thing about Santa Fe, New Mexico is it's a really small town with a small airport. And as a consequence, not many flights leave out of there. I had an event till like 1 a.m. and my choice of flights out were either like 6 a.m. or 6 p.m. And I couldn't spend the whole day in Santa Fe twiddling my thumbs at the hotel or the airport. So what did I do? I just stayed up all night until the car came at 4:30, picked me up, took me to the airport, and essentially went 48 hours with about an hour and a half of napping on the plane. An hour and a half of napping on the plane that was disturbed on the regular by the stewardess clanging me in the face. I'll never forget. She was nothing against her, but she was a larger woman. So she would walk down the aisle, and I guess I sort of, as I dozed off, would lean into the aisle a little bit, and she would knock me. She knocked me like 3 times. She hit me with the drink cart twice. And again, it's my fault for sort of leaning into the aisle as I'm falling asleep. But I finally sort of like adjust my sleep position to where my head is pointing forward and I'm not leaning into anything. And I wake up, wham, I get hit in the face, and I see the stewardess's elbow right there, the flight attendant's elbow. She elbowed me in the freaking head. I was like, I can't win. If God has a plan for me, it's that I don't get sleep. And she was like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, it's par for the course. It's a comedy of errors at this stage in the game. I can't believe I just got elbowed in the face by a flight attendant. Sleep is not my friend. So I don't get a whole lot of sleep. And I get through life and I manage, but I had to work on Saturday this past weekend just gone by. I had to work on Saturday and I slept until I woke up this past Saturday, which is great. I didn't sleep too long. I think that can, make things a little bit more difficult for you. But I slept until I woke up. I slept until Millhouse decided he wanted to go out for a walk. And then I woke up and went for a walk, and I realized I'd probably gotten that fabled 8 hours of sleep that people talk about but never get. gotten 8 hours of sleep. And then I had to go be on the air. I had to go be on the air at a station, but my shift didn't start till later. I didn't have stuff to do during the front half of the day. No one was calling me. My phone wasn't ringing. I wasn't getting sort of like all the usual sort of slings and arrows of the average workday that I get, but I did have to go into work, and I was just like, oh my gosh, everything's so much better. I'm so much more cognizant and lucid, and everything coming out of my mouth as a radio broadcaster is, well, I don't know if other people can tell the difference, but I sure can. I'm having to expend much less effort to be much better. Wow. This sleep thing is really freaking fantastic. And that was with 8 hours, that fabled 8 hours. And now, like I said, scientists are saying that modern life has gotten so stressful that we now need more than those 8 hours of sleep. We need 8.5. According to sleep researchers out of Penn State University, modern life has gotten so unbelievably stressful that we now need 8.5 hours of sleep, real sleep, to be healthy. Why? Well, here's why. What's your day look like? We've got all this modern technology. We've got all this modern technology that was supposed to simplify things, supposed to give us more time. Has one of those pieces of tech that has become a regular part of your life in any way, shape, or form made your life more simple or given you more time? No, it hasn't. It's given people more access to you. It's given people the expectation that you're going to get back to them immediately. I was the last person I knew to get a smartphone, and there's a very simple reason for that. I was like, these people get too much of my life anyway. I don't want to be at someone's beck and call. I remember I would get calls from people being like, hey, did you get that email? No, but I just sent it to you. Right. I'm out. But I just sent you the email. Why don't you have it? I'm out. I don't understand. Well, I don't have the internet on my phone. You what? It's 2000, whatever it was. How can you not have the internet on the phone, on your phone? Well, mostly because I don't have to respond to you immediately. I will respond to your emails when I get in and check my email. Until then, if you need something, you're going to have to make a call like this one. And nobody really wants to call. They just want to email. And so it was great. But eventually, I had to break down. I had to join the real world. It was a sad, sad day. But all these sort of distractions, all these modern pieces of tech, they were supposed to free you up, give you more time with your friends, family, loved ones, perhaps more time to, sleep in. None of the above has happened. All these distractions bombard you during the day, and they're making it harder for you to fall asleep at night. And they're making it harder for you to go back to sleep when you wake up in the middle of the night. All of a sudden, your mind rushes to all the things that you were supposed to be doing, all those unanswered emails, everything that you've got going on, all those distractions, all those pieces of tech harassing you when they were supposed to make your life easier and freer. Not so much. So apparently, because of the stress of modern life, doctors are now saying we really need 8.5 hours in bed to get 8 actual hours of sleep, if that makes sense. But if you can find a way to get that much sleep, the researchers say it'll really be worth it. They say that if you bump yourself up from 6 or 7 hours of sleep a night to 8 or 8.5, you will be shocked at how high of a level you can operate on.
You're longing for that shining sun. You walk these streets most every day. You're waiting to get washed away.
Now, more AD on the radio.
So you know how we were talking earlier about sleep and how you need 8.5 hours of it now. Researchers, I think at Penn State University, said that the standard 8 hours that people thought they believed in the past wouldn't cut it any longer because, well, modern life had become so unbelievably stressful that to get a full 8 hours of sleep, we needed 8.5 hours in bed because of all the distractions that modern technology causes. Well, this is related. If you had to guess, if you had to take a wild shot in the dark, do you feel like people are getting smarter or stupider, just in general, based on your interactions with folk around town in your daily life. You are, of course, going, well, of course people are getting stupider. Everybody's stupid and I'm smart, and it's just frustrating for those of us that know it all. And that's how you walk around. That's the general mindset that you go through life with. Everybody's a freaking moron. And here's the thing, the sad thing, you're actually right. Yeah, it's probably the least shocking news story of the year. According to a new study, people just keep on getting dumber. Some researchers out of Norway studied IQ tests from men born between 1962 and 1991. And they found without fail, every generation was dumber than the one before it by about 7 IQ points. A significant drop. And the reason why is, well, it has a lot to do with the things that we're talking about. That cell phone of yours. Every form of media getting into your skull and distracting you from, living a real life. That really takes a toll, not just on your ability to get a decent night of sleep. And maybe the lack of sleep or maybe the lack of quality sleep is tied to the decline in the intelligence of the average human being, dropping about 7 IQ points from generation to generation. But when these researchers accounted for all the possible factors as to why we as a species are getting dumber, there were a couple things that stood out. 3, as a matter of fact. 1, the quality of education is getting worse. 2, nutrition is getting worse. And finally, every generation has more and more exposure to media. And you think about it. You think about the amount of time you spend outside of your head as opposed to inside your head. Honestly. Like, your thoughts used to be your own. And I'm not saying they're not. I'm not saying that you're mind controlled or anything of that nature. But there used to be times where you were forced to spend moments by yourself. And it's a skill that we're losing. The ability to just be by yourself alone. And let your mind do the things that it's going to do. Let it turn things over in the way your mind can. Instead, every last sort of thought we have is informed by something external. Some form of media. It is interesting. You ever see that, I think it was Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, where Chris Rock is talking to Jerry Seinfeld, and he's talking about young comics and how they go out all the time with each other, and they're hanging out, and they're doing things. And he was like, I see their careers moving slower than they should. And it's because they're all hanging out with other people, doing other things, hanging out on Twitter. And he's like, this doesn't work. This doesn't work as a comedian. You have to let go of that security blanket of other people. You have to let go of that security blanket of your phone. You have to let go of that security blanket of all these different forms of media that are bombarding you over and over again, day in and day out, and have to be on your own, by yourself, with your thoughts. You think about the amount of time that you're alone with your thoughts, just thinking your thoughts. When does that happen? Maybe you're struggling to fall asleep when you finally put the phone down. But you're always in touch, you're always connected, you're always taking in some sort of information from something external. And it's taking away the power of our minds. It's very clear, according to this new study. So important. And we talk about this on the show all the time, and this really sort of is a hot button issue for those of us that have been hanging out on this show for a while. I hear it from you all the time. And we talk about it constantly. You know in your heart of hearts what's right and what's wrong. I mean, usually this is just applied to, cable news. Fox is telling you one thing, MSNBC is telling you another thing. People are screaming that if you don't believe what they believe, you're an evil a-hole that hates America. It doesn't matter what side of the political fence you're on. There's someone vying for your attention and vying for your thought and telling you that if you don't think what they tell you to think, you're kind of a dummy. As part of our political process all the time. So we talk about this. You know in your heart of hearts. You know where your own moral compass's true north points. You know what's right and what's wrong to you. And you should be able to pursue that without a politician, without a preacher, without a cable news channel trying to tell you what that is. But the same goes for more or less everything else. We spend so little time alone with our thoughts in 2018 because we're externally stimulated by everything. And then what happens if you're externally stimulated? If you're not externally stimulated, you get bored. I mean, think about the last time you stood in line for something. You stand in line for, to use the bathroom at a show or something like that. You stand in line at the bank. You stand in line at, maybe at an airport counter or something like that. And you used to just have to stand there and think stuff. That's what you're doing. You're waiting. You were thinking. Maybe you had a book with you and you were deciding to read that book. Maybe you had a pair of headphones in and you were listening to some music. But ultimately, your thoughts were your own and you were on your own. Now, nobody stands in line without immediately whipping out their phone and scrolling through their Facebook feed or their Instagram feed or any of the above. And guess what? It's making us dumber as a society. And I'm not saying you need to unplug and uninstall all these apps from your phones, but don't be afraid to spend time with yourself. Don't be afraid to stand in line and be alone with your thoughts. You might be amazed by what you're thinking, and we as a society might not be getting stupider. Yeah, we are getting dumber. So your kids will have a shot at bucking this trend if you really focus on their education, their nutrition, their eating habits, and keeping them away from the 8 billion types of media that are trying to grab their eyeballs. And that goes for you and me too.
Leave the stimulation to the professionals.
Everyone is so smart.
KPRC, more stimulating talk radio.
There's something happening here, and you should know what it is. The dumbing up of America. Now, more AD on the radio.
So, you and I were talking about this earlier, that we, as a species, are getting dumber. We're dropping... Well, scientists in Norway found that men and women are getting dumber by an average of 7 IQ points with each passing generation. Yeah. We're getting dumber as a species by an average of 7 IQ points with each passing generation. Now, you think about the average number of IQ points that's the average person has rattling around in their head, and you think about the number of generations it'll take for us to get remarkably stupid, and it's not that far freaking off. Like we were saying earlier, the 3 factors that stood out, these are the reasons why we as a species are getting dumber. The quality of education is getting worse. Nutrition is getting worse. And every generation has more and more exposure to media. There is one optimistic part, though. People can improve their IQ, especially when they're teenagers. So your kids will have a shot at bucking this trend if you really focus on their education, their eating habits, and keeping them away from the 8 billion types of media that are trying to grab their eyeballs. But yeah, we're getting dumber by 7 IQ points with each passing generation. So we're basically right on schedule to become the movie Idiocracy, which, by the way, if you haven't seen it, please watch it. Mike Judge, the guy responsible for King of the Hill and Beavis and Butthead in Silicon Valley, he was behind it. And I don't know that it was tremendously successful back in the day when it came out, but I think more and more people are starting to hearken back to it going, oh my gosh, he predicted everything.
As the 21st century began, human evolution was at a turning point. Natural selection, the process by which the strongest, the smartest, the fastest reproduced in greater numbers than the rest, a process which had once favored the noblest traits of man, now began to favor different traits. Most science fiction of the day predicted a future that was more civilized and more intelligent. But as time went on, things seemed to be heading in the opposite direction, a dumbing down. How did this happen? Evolution does not necessarily reward intelligence. With no natural predators to thin the herd, it began to simply selectively reward those who reproduced the most and left the intelligent to become an endangered species.
Yeah. Case in point, we now live in a day and age where Kim Kardashian has a very realistic shot at becoming a lawyer without the benefit of having had to go to college or law school. It's absolutely true. And we'll discuss how after we take a look at the news. Let's have a look at what's going on today. Speaking of which, Kim Kardashian has gone on the record saying that she felt fulfilled helping Alice Johnson get clemency. Not as fulfilling as getting 1 million likes for a nude Instagram post, but still, hey, pretty fulfilling. Angelina Jolie may lose primary custody of her kids to Brad Pitt. Yep, Angelina Jolie might be losing primary custody of her kids to Brad Pitt. Right now, I believe she's desperately trying to reach an agreement where she only gives up the ones whose first name starts with A through M. There's a lot of them. A Los Angeles woman has filed a restraining order against Chris Brown, which, gives her something in common with literally anyone who's ever dated, met, or come within 500 yards of Chris Brown. That guy bothers me. That guy bothers me because he's such a freaking snake. He's such a slippery customer that he's managed to somehow time out his hideous abuse of women so that it happened right before he managed to time out his hideous abuse of women so that it allowed him to still have a career. The whole Me Too thing that's going on. If this guy had used Rihanna's face as a speed bag during this, the way he did a couple years back, he would have been over and done with. I mean, I found it to be hideously disgusting when that guy's record label lurched into action and went, oh my gosh, we're making so much money out of him, we can't possibly have this go away. This cash cow must continue to be milked regardless of the moral, ethical, and legal consequences. They basically did whatever it took to do a complete 180 degrees on his public persona. There was no doubt about it. He'd really beaten up Rihanna. We all saw the pictures. We all know what happened. He more or less admitted to it. In fact, I think he did admit to it. And this guy should be in jail. He should absolutely be in jail. His career should absolutely be in the toilet. He should not be walking the streets. He should not be getting Grammys and money and adulation. And he just sort of got his egregious human rights violations out right before the world became obsessed with the idea of not abusing women. Like, he's still hanging out. He's still around. He's still doing stuff. And how that's even a thing absolutely boggles my mind. Do you hear about the Chris Hardwick guy? Chris Hardwick, who I guess he was on some MTV game show back in the day, and then he started the whole Nerdist thing and started a podcast, and all of a sudden found himself a media mogul. The career of talk show host Chris Hardwick is in jeopardy after his girlfriend Chloe Dykstra wrote a blog post accusing him of emotional abuse. She's an actress and TV host herself. She didn't name him in the post, but the details were specific enough to make it obvious. These alleged incidents happened some years back when she was in her early 20s. She'll be 30 this September. Chloe said that Chris was controlling, insulting, and abused her sexually regularly because she was expected to be available to him whenever he was in the mood, and cut her off from her friends. Now, the sexual abuse, by the way, this doesn't mitigate a freaking thing that Chris Hardwick did. But the sexual abuse did not consist of hitting or beating her or raping her. It consisted of him expecting her to be available to him whenever he was in the mood. At no point did it say he physically hurt her or forced her to do anything. Like I said, this doesn't mitigate any of what Chris Hardwick has been accused of. That's reprehensible behavior, obviously. But when you compare it to what Chris Brown got away with, he's walking around, basking in the glory of a happy, healthy, fulfilling career where the adulation of teenagers everywhere flies his way after he beat the living crap out of his girlfriend in a very public way that we all saw. And somehow he was still allowed to walk the streets. Still allowed to have a career. The court of public opinion didn't really catch up to this stuff until recently. And so Chris Hardwick, over, done. Yesterday's news because he was controlling, insulting, and expected his girlfriend to be sexually available to him whenever he was in the mood, regardless of how she felt. And he's done for. In what world does Chris Brown continue to get to walk around? Like I said, in no way, shape, or form do I understand this. Chloe Dykstra said she got to the point where she was anorexic and tearing her hair out. She said that when she finally gathered up enough courage and self-esteem to leave him, he begged her to stay. And when that didn't work, he did everything he could to destroy her career. At the end of the piece, Chloe suggested that her ex not try and sue her because she has audio and video to back up her story. Well, there's no word on legal action, but Hardwick has already denied her accusations. He said, "I'm devastated to read that she is now accusing me of conduct that did not occur. I was blindsided by her post and always wanted the best for her. As a husband, a son, and future father, I do not condone any kind of mistreatment of women." But the career damage looks like it's already been done. The folks over at AMC pulled his show Talking with Chris Hardwick, at least for now, to assess the situation. Hardwick is better known for his show Talking Dead, the companion series to The Walking Dead, but both shows are done for the season. Hardwick also does the game show The Wall for NBC, and they're assessing the situation too. These networks say they've had positive working relationships with Hardwick, and they were surprised by the allegations, but still, until further notice, he is done. He, in case you didn't know, he had this thing called Nerdist, which I believe started out as a podcast and then became sort of like a multimedia empire. Really sort of like hit at the right time to capitalize on nerd culture becoming unbelievably dominant. Comic-Con was this thing just for nerds. And he started sort of the Nerdist thing right around the time the entire world was finding out about Comic-Con. It became one of the biggest media events on the face of the freaking planet. And even the Nerdist empire that he founded has scrubbed all reference to him pending further investigation. Hardwick sold Nerdist in 2013 for a freaking fortune, and the company pointed out that he's had no operational involvement for the past 3 or 4 years. But nevertheless, let's just take stock of what he's been accused with. All of it accused of. All of it reprehensible. All of it unforgivable. All of it completely unacceptable. But he was controlling, insulting, and sexually abusive in that he expected her to be available to him whenever he was in the mood. At no point did we find that he caused her physical harm. At no point did we find that he raped her. The abuse was emotional. And like I said, none of this mitigates anything that he's done. And these companies are right. These companies are right to be investigating the situation and deciding whether or not they want to continue their working relationship with him. But my point freaking is, Chris Brown beat the crap out of a woman. We all saw the picture. He worked Rihanna over like a prize fighter. And somehow, he's managed to skate on this. And I know you and I have talked about this in the past, but it just boggles my mind so much. And the hypocrisy of the zeitgeist of America on this one boggles my mind so much. And I guess I keep throwing this out there because I hope maybe me or somebody else will have a Hannibal Buress moment where it makes the rest of the world go, oh, wait a second. Yeah. Well, how is it we forgave this person? Why don't we sort of hold him accountable in the way that we've decided to hold everybody else accountable too? Why, in any way, shape, or form, should this guy get to skate? Why in any way, shape, or form, if we're going to go back and retroactively nail Bill Cosby for the things that he did, should Chris Brown be allowed to get away with the things that he did? Now, I suppose part of it is the fact that Rihanna seemed to forgive him. I think they dated for a little while afterwards, but the message that it sends about what it's acceptable to do is just beyond reproach. It's beyond the pale. It's yeah. So tell your friends, tell everyone, Chris Hardwick's bad. Chris Brown is much, much worse.